I can still picture her, perfectly framed by those floor-to-ceiling windows. We were at this trendy upscale bistro in Portland, Oregon. The kind of place that always feels a little too bright, a little too exposed. And Clara, she'd specifically asked for the table right by the glass, the one where literally anyone walking by could see us. It felt like she was already performing, even before she opened her mouth. And then she did. The wedding's off, Ethan. I don't love you anymore. Just like that. Her voice, it didn't just carry across the room, it cut through it. I watched forks freeze midair. Conversations just died. Every single head in that place turned toward us. And that's when I saw them. Her friends, tucked away at a table near the bar. 3 of them. And Olivia, her best friend, already had her phone pointed right at us, the little red recording light glowing. My name's Ethan. I'm 27. I'd spent 4 years building a life with Clara, 2 of those engaged. And in that moment, seeing her sit there, delivering her lines for an audience, I realized something chilling. I had never, not once, truly seen her without one. It wasn't the breakup itself that gut-punched me. It was the sheer, meticulous production value of it all. The way she'd staged it, right down to the choice of table, the precise inflection of her voice. She wanted a scene. She wanted me to be the devastated ex, to fall apart, to give them the drama they were waiting for. Olivia wasn't just recording, she'd clearly been recording before Clara even started speaking. And those other friends, their faces were alight with this strange, almost giddy excitement, like they were watching their favorite show live. Something inside me just went still. Like a circuit breaker had tripped. Instead of the explosion she was clearly expecting, I just felt this cold, crystal clear calm. I looked at her, arms crossed, chin high, eyes darting between me and her little film crew. And in that quiet, bright restaurant, it hit me. This wasn't an ending to a relationship. This was content. Thank you for being honest, I heard myself say. My voice was steady. Almost cheerful, even. Which was absolutely not the reaction she'd scripted. Her expression, it flickered. Just for a second, but I saw it. Confusion. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the engagement ring. We were supposed to take it to the jeweler that week to get it resized. Instead, I placed it carefully on the table between us. Like a chess piece. The restaurant had gone so quiet you could hear the kitchen. The faint sizzle of something cooking, a distant laugh. Normal life, carrying on, while mine was apparently being live-streamed. I pulled out my wallet, counted out enough cash for my half of the meal, plus a really generous tip. The waitress didn't deserve to be caught in Clara's performance art. And then I just stood up. No hurry. No rush. Looks like I'm throwing myself a narrow escape party, I said. And her friends? They actually chuckled. They genuinely thought I was having some kind of public breakdown disguised as a bad joke. But I was serious. I walked out of that place, spine straight, hands steady. Past the tables of strangers who'd just watched my engagement implode. Past her little film crew. Past the hostess who looked like she wanted to offer condolences. I didn't look back. Not once. My car was parked 3 blocks away. I made it 2 before my phone started buzzing. Text after text. Clara, asking if I'd even heard what she said. Then, less than a minute later, demanding we talk about it like adults. I sat in my car, staring at those messages. At the 4 years of conditioning that screamed at me to respond. To explain. To fix whatever I'd apparently done wrong. And instead, I did something I had never, ever done in our entire relationship. I put my phone on silent. And I drove home without answering. Our apartment felt different when I walked in. Like I was seeing it for the first time. I noticed how my stuff had slowly, subtly, migrated to corners and closets, while her things sprawled across every single surface. I made a cup of coffee and sat on the couch we'd picked out together, the one she'd insisted on, even though it was uncomfortable as hell. And I just let my brain start to process what had actually happened. The more I thought about it, the weirder the little details became. How she'd suggested that specific bistro yesterday, all casual, just felt like Italian, when we usually planned dates days in advance. How she'd been on her phone all morning, texting constantly, which wasn't unusual, but she'd had that secretive smile. Like she was coordinating something. And the way she'd dressed up, much more than normal for a Saturday lunch. For the cameras, I guess. I opened my laptop and pulled up our shared Google Drive. The one where we kept all our wedding planning documents and apartment stuff. Just out of curiosity, I started scrolling through the recent activity. And that's when I saw it. A file I didn't recognize. Labeled with a date from 2 weeks ago. It was a contact list. About 40 people. And a note at the top that said, priority notification sent immediately after with today's date, written 2 weeks before she ended things. In that restaurant. I just sat there, staring at the screen. At the proof that my public humiliation had been scheduled like a dentist appointment. And something in my chest shifted. From hurt to something much colder, much more focused. She planned this. Coordinated her audience. Prepared her speech. Arranged for documentation. She built a narrative where I was supposed to be the villain. Or the victim. Whatever role made her look best. My phone buzzed again. More messages. Her tone was shifting, from confused to angry. You're being childish. This isn't like you. I know you're in shock. And I realized, with perfect clarity, she needed me to fall apart. Needed me to confirm whatever story she'd already told people about why she had to end things. I thought about that moment in the restaurant. The phone's recording. The friends watching. The careful staging of the whole scene. And then I remembered it. That tiny detail I'd missed in the moment. Olivia hadn't just started recording when Clara spoke. She'd been filming before Clara even started talking. Like she'd known exactly when the show was supposed to start. This wasn't a breakup. This was a production. And they'd all been waiting for me to give them the content they wanted. The tears. The anger. The breakdown that would make their story complete. I closed my laptop. Looked around the apartment. For years of my life, arranged like set decoration for someone else's narrative. And I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to give them the ending they'd written. The next 3 days were a masterclass in watching someone lose control of their own narrative. And I didn't have to do anything except stay quiet. Clara's messages came in waves. Each one more desperate than the last. Cycling through confusion, anger, and this weird, concerned tone, like she was checking on a mental patient. She kept saying I was acting out of character. That shock makes people do strange things. That she was worried about me. Every message just made it clearer that my silence was destroying whatever script she'd written. She needed me to react, to give her the breakdown or the angry explosion that would justify whatever she'd already told people. And instead, I was giving her nothing. I spent those days doing something I should have done months ago. Actually looking at the logistics of our life together. And that's when I realized just how carefully she'd positioned everything. The wedding venue was booked under my name. The deposit paid from my account. Same with the caterer, the photographer, the florist. All of it for convenience, she'd said at the time. I started making calls. Keeping my voice neutral and professional. Explaining that the wedding was off and asking about refunds or alternatives. The venue manager was surprisingly sympathetic. Said they couldn't refund the deposit, but I could use the space for another event within the next year. Same with most of the other vendors. That's when the idea hit me. Not as revenge, but as reclamation. Why let that money, that beautiful space, go to waste? When I could turn it into something actually meaningful? I could throw a party. A real one. Celebrating the fact that I'd dodged something terrible. And suddenly, the whole disaster started feeling less like an ending and more like an opportunity. I called my best friend, Leo, that evening and explained the concept. He was quiet for a second. Then he started laughing. The kind of laugh that meant he thought I was either brilliant or completely insane. But the more I explained it, the more it made sense. I wasn't going to waste energy being angry or hurt. I was going to take back the narrative she tried to write for me. On the fourth day, I went deeper into our shared Google Drive. Not snooping, exactly. More like forensic accounting of a relationship. I looked at files I'd never paid attention to before. And that's when I found the draft. It was titled with her initials and a date. The same date as the restaurant scene. And when I opened it, my stomach dropped. The message began with her explaining she'd made the difficult decision to end our engagement because we no longer shared the same values and life goals. And it went on for 3 paragraphs, painting me as emotionally unavailable, resistant to growth, someone who couldn't meet her needs. The thing that got me was how polished it was. How carefully worded to make her sound mature and thoughtful, while implying I was the problem without ever directly saying anything actionable. She'd written this before she'd ended things. Prepared her public statement like a press release. I realized this whole breakup had been managed like a PR campaign. I checked the document history. Saw she created it 2 weeks before the restaurant. Revised it 3 times. And the final edit was the morning of our lunch. She'd known exactly what she was going to do. Exactly what she was going to say. And exactly how she wanted everyone else to see it. I kept digging. Feeling less guilty about it with every click. And found a folder I didn't remember seeing before. Inside were screenshots of texts between Clara and her friends. Reading them felt like watching a conspiracy unfold in real time. She'd written to Olivia and 2 others 3 days before the restaurant, telling them today was the day, lunch at 12:30, saying she really wanted them there. Olivia had replied with 3 fire emojis, saying this was going to be so intense. Another friend had written, asking if Clara was sure she wanted witnesses. And Clara's response made my blood run cold. She said she needed people there because she was scared of how I might react. That I'd been controlling and unpredictable lately. That she needed the safety of a public place and friendly faces. It was complete fiction. I'd never been anything but accommodating. To the point of losing myself in the relationship. But she'd built this narrative of me as someone dangerous. Someone she couldn't break up with privately. The worst part was seeing how thoroughly she'd sold it. Her friends were responding with concern and support. Telling her how brave she was. Offering to be there for protection. She'd turned our breakup into a rescue mission, with herself as the victim. But there was another folder. One that made everything else click into place. And inside it were messages with someone named Marcus. The earliest ones dated back 5 months. Casual at first. Then increasingly familiar. Then unmistakably intimate, without ever crossing into explicit territory. She'd written to Marcus the day before the restaurant scene, saying tomorrow she was finally ending things with me, that she couldn't wait to start their next chapter. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through months of emotional connection documented in cheerful texts and late-night calls. I pulled up our phone records from the family plan. Something I'd never bothered checking before. And there it was. Marcus's number appearing in July, then August, with increasing frequency. Calls lasting 30 minutes. 45 minutes. An hour. While I'd been planning our wedding and picking out flowers and tasting cake samples, she'd been building an exit strategy with someone new. The timeline made perfect sense now. She hadn't fallen out of love with me and then met Marcus. She'd met Marcus and then decided to orchestrate a breakup that would let her walk away looking like the reasonable one. My friend Leo came over that night. I showed him everything. Not because I wanted validation, but because I needed someone else to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. She told people you were controlling, Leo said, staring at the screenshots with his mouth literally hanging open. I had to remind him that I was probably the least controlling person he knew. That I'd let her make every single decision about our lives. He scrolled through the messages with Marcus. The timeline of her building this narrative. The proof of planning. And when he looked up at me, his expression was something between fury and admiration. "What are you going to do?" he asked. And I realized I already knew. I wasn't going to post on social media. Wasn't going to send mass emails. Wasn't going to fight her in the court of public opinion. I was just going to let the truth exist. I explained to Leo that I was throwing that party. Inviting everyone. Our friends. My family. Co-workers. Even some of her people who might be curious. And when people asked what happened, I'd simply show them the evidence and let them draw their own conclusions. Leo nodded slowly, understanding the approach. I wasn't attacking her. I wasn't even defending myself aggressively. I was just going to stop protecting her version of events. I started working on invitations that night. Keeping them simple and warm. Describing a celebration of new beginnings. Closing old doors and opening new ones. Inviting people to join me for an evening of food, music, and fresh starts. I sent them to my actual friends, the people who'd supported me, my family, colleagues I trusted. And a handful of people from Clara's circle who I thought might be operating on incomplete information. I also did something calculated. I made copies of the key files from our shared drive and saved them to my personal account. Then changed the sharing settings so Clara could still view everything, but couldn't edit or delete. I wanted her to know the evidence existed. And that she couldn't make it disappear. The venue was already paid for. The caterer was willing to modify the menu. And suddenly, this disaster she created was transforming into something that felt like reclaiming my own life. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Another message asking why I was being so distant. Saying this wasn't healthy. That I was scaring her. I thought about how she'd wanted me to break down on camera. How she'd staged everything perfectly. And I realized I'd done something she hadn't planned for. I stayed calm. I said it out loud to my empty apartment. And the sound of my own voice saying it made it feel real. Sitting there, surrounded by wedding planning documents that would never be used for their original purpose, I felt something shift. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Just clarity. She tried to write a story where I was the problem and she was the hero escaping. But stories only work when everyone agrees to play their assigned role. And I was done with the script she'd handed me. The venue looked completely different than it would have for a wedding. And that was exactly the point. I'd worked with the coordinator to strip away all the formal romantic stuff and replace it with something that actually felt like me. Warm lighting instead of dramatic spotlights. Seasonal flowers and simple arrangements instead of elaborate centerpieces. A playlist of music I actually liked instead of the classical selections Clara had insisted would be classy. Walking into that space the night of the party felt like breathing for the first time in years. Like I'd been holding myself in this tight, controlled shape and could finally expand. The caterer had switched from plated dinners to a relaxed buffet style. There was a bar serving craft beer and good wine. And the whole atmosphere screamed celebration instead of obligation. People started arriving around 7. My friends and family first, then coworkers. Then a few faces I recognized from Clara's social circle, who'd apparently been curious enough to show up. My mom hugged me for a long time when she walked in. Didn't say anything, just held on tight. And I realized she'd probably been worried I was falling apart these past 2 weeks. Leo was working the room like he was my campaign manager, greeting people, making introductions. And I caught him explaining to someone that this was about new chapters and fresh starts, which was perfect because it was true. By 8 o'clock, the place was packed. Maybe 60 people. And that's when the questions started. People were polite at first, dancing around it. Asking how I was doing. Saying they'd heard the wedding was off. I could see them trying to figure out what version of events they were supposed to believe. A woman from Clara's book club approached me carefully, like she was worried I might be fragile. She asked what had actually happened between us. I didn't put on a show. Didn't gather everyone around for a big announcement. I just pulled up my phone and showed her the screenshots. The timeline. The proof of planning. Her expression shifted from sympathy to shock to something like anger as she scrolled through the evidence of Clara's staged breakup. The messages coordinating the restaurant scene. The draft statement written 2 weeks early. She asked if she could show her husband. I said, of course. I'm not hiding anything anymore. And I watched them huddled together, looking at my phone with increasingly horrified faces. That happened maybe a dozen times over the next hour. Someone would ask. I'd show them the truth. They'd share it with whoever they'd come with. And slowly, the real story spread through the room like wildfire. The turning point came around 9. When a guy I barely knew, someone's husband who'd been at the edge of Clara's social circle, came up to me with this stricken expression and told me he owed me an apology. He explained that his wife had told him I was controlling and possibly dangerous. That Clara had been scared to break up with me privately. And he believed it, because why wouldn't he? But seeing me now, talking calmly with guests, laughing, completely stable, he realized how wrong that characterization had been. His wife joined us then, looking embarrassed, and pulled out her phone to show me the group text where Clara had painted me as unstable. Seeing her messages side by side with the actual evidence I'd been showing people was damning. Clara's fictional version, where I was the villain, versus reality, where I was just a guy who'd been lied to and manipulated for months. Other people started gathering around, sharing pieces of the story they'd been told. And we assembled this picture of how thoroughly Clara had worked to control the narrative before she'd even ended things. How many people she'd fed carefully crafted lies to. How systematic her campaign had been. That's when Clara showed up. The energy in the room completely shifted. It was almost 10. The party was in full swing, and she walked in like she owned the place. Which was darkly funny, considering I'd paid for it. She must have heard about the party through mutual friends or seen something on social media. And she was dressed up. Hair and makeup perfect. Wearing this expression that was half righteous anger and half calculated victim. The same face she'd perfected for the restaurant. She scanned the room, saw me surrounded by people who were clearly on my side. And something flickered across her face. It might have been panic. "What are you doing?" "You're spreading lies about me," she said. Her voice cut through the music and conversation. People turned to watch. Phones came out. And I realized, with perfect clarity, this was exactly what had happened at the restaurant. Except the roles were reversed. She needed everyone to see me as the bad guy. Needed to perform her victimhood. But this time, she didn't have a coordinated audience. She had a room full of people who'd seen the actual evidence. I didn't yell. Didn't match her energy. Just kept my voice level and clear. "You weren't invited, Clara," I said. And the simplicity of it seemed to throw her off balance. She started to argue. Saying I'd manipulated the screenshots. That I'd faked timestamps. That everyone was believing a carefully constructed lie. Her desperation was so obvious it was almost painful to watch. "These are our shared files. You can still access them right now." The edit history shows your email creating them, I said, holding up my phone with our Google Drive open. The room had gone completely silent. That same restaurant quiet. Except this time, I wasn't the one being humiliated. She looked around at all these faces. Some of them her friends. Or people she'd carefully cultivated relationships with. And I could see her realizing that her story had fallen apart. That the narrative she'd spent weeks building was collapsing in real time. Someone near the back started filming. I saw the phone go up. And Clara noticed it, too. Her face went through this rapid series of expressions. Anger. To fear. To something calculating, like she was trying to figure out how to salvage this. But there was no salvaging it. She turned and walked out without another word. The door closing behind her with this final click. And there was this collective exhale in the room, like everyone had been holding their breath. A few people started to applaud, but I waved it off. Asked the DJ to turn the music back up. Because this wasn't about humiliating her the way she tried to humiliate me. This was just about the truth finally being visible. The rest of the night was exactly what I'd wanted. Dancing. Laughing. Actual genuine celebration. People coming up to tell me they were proud of how I'd handled everything. Friends making toasts about new beginnings and narrow escapes. I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd gotten revenge. But because I'd stopped carrying the weight of her lies. The next morning, I started getting texts from mutual friends with updates I hadn't asked for. Clara had tried to do damage control on social media, but it backfired spectacularly when people started asking questions she couldn't answer consistently. Someone told me that Marcus had ended things with her within the week after the party. Apparently, he hadn't signed up for dating someone who'd orchestrated that level of manipulation and deceit. Her close friend group started distancing themselves. Not publicly, but in that quiet way where invitations stopped coming and group chats go silent. I heard through Leo a few weeks later that she'd started looking at jobs in different parts of the country. That she couldn't handle running into people who knew the truth. I didn't feel satisfaction, exactly. More like relief that the story had finally ended the way it should have. With the truth visible instead of buried under her carefully constructed fiction. I used the money I'd saved for our wedding to put a down payment on my own place. A small apartment in a neighborhood of Seattle, Washington I'd always liked, but Clara had said was too far from her friends. I decorated it the way I wanted. Filled it with things I'd actually chosen. Started reconnecting with friends I'd lost touch with during the relationship because they hadn't fit into Clara's social strategy. I picked up hobbies she'd always dismissed as wastes of time. I remembered what it felt like to make decisions without running them past someone else first. Without calculating how they'd fit into someone else's narrative. About 6 months later, I ran into one of Clara's old friends at a coffee shop. Someone who'd been at the party. And she asked if I regretted how everything went down. I thought about it for a second. And realized I didn't. Not even a little bit. Clara had wanted to break me in public. Wanted to watch me fall apart and confirm whatever story she'd built about me being unstable and unable to handle reality. But instead, she'd given me the push I needed to finally see clearly. The real tragedy wasn't that she'd tried to destroy me. It was that in trying to control every detail of the narrative, she destroyed herself. Lost her relationship. Her reputation. Her friend group. And her future with Marcus. All because she couldn't just end things honestly. I finished my coffee and walked out into the sunshine, heading home to my own apartment, my own life, my own story. And for the first time in years, I wasn't playing a role someone else had written for me. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to control how others saw you?